Charlotte! So this who you are with now. Hope he knows how useless you are. So you left me for this fool. Don't ever talk to my woman like that ever again.
Charlotte had barely taken a few steps out of the hotel with James when her perfect afternoon turned into a nightmare. The two of them were laughing, holding hands, and enjoying each other's company when a man suddenly stepped in front of them. The moment he saw Charlotte, his face twisted with rage. "You are useless," he shouted. "You will never amount to anything. Stop pretending you're successful." His insults echoed loudly as nearby people stopped to watch. Charlotte froze in shock, her face draining of color. James looked at the stranger in confusion, unable to understand why a man he had never seen before was attacking the woman he loved. Daniel kept shouting one insult after another, but before Charlotte could explain who he was, James's fist slammed into his face, sending him crashing hard to the ground. "Never speak about my woman like that again," James warned. Then he grabbed Charlotte's trembling hand and led her toward their car, leaving the man sprawled on the ground. But who was Daniel? Why did he hate Charlotte so much? And what terrible secret from her past had suddenly come back to haunt her? The answers began years earlier, long before Charlotte met James. Before we continue, if you enjoy powerful stories filled with drama, love, betrayal, and life-changing lessons, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss another inspiring story. Now, let's go back to where it all began. Years earlier, Charlotte arrived at the university carrying more than just a suitcase and a few belongings. She carried dreams, big dreams. She was intelligent, hardworking, and determined to build a better future for herself and for the parents who had sacrificed so much to get her there. On the day she moved into her hostel, she stood quietly by her window and whispered to herself, "I will make them proud. No matter how hard it gets, I will not fail." Charlotte's parents were not wealthy. They had spent years saving and making sacrifices so their daughter could receive an education. Knowing this made Charlotte even more determined to succeed. During her first year, everything seemed to be going according to plan until she met Daniel. Daniel was charming and confident. He always seemed to know exactly what to say. The first time they met, he made her laugh so much that her cheeks hurt. He gave her compliments, listened to her dreams, and made her feel like the most important person in the world. "You are different from other girls," Daniel often told her. "There is something special about you." Charlotte smiled every time she heard those words. Nobody had ever made her feel so seen and appreciated. As the weeks passed, they spent more time together. Friendship quickly turned into love, and before long they began dating. At first, Charlotte felt lucky. She believed she had found someone who truly cared about her. But slowly, things began to change. The sweet words started disappearing. The compliments became criticism. The kindness became control. "Why are you always talking to that guy?" Daniel asked one afternoon after seeing her discussing an assignment with a classmate. "We were only talking about schoolwork," Charlotte explained. "Don't lie to me. I know how girls like you behave." Charlotte was shocked by his reaction, but she convinced herself he was only being protective. As time went on, Daniel became worse. He questioned every friendship she had. He wanted to know where she was at all times. If she spent time with friends, he became angry. If she did not answer his calls immediately, he accused her of cheating. "You should be grateful I even want to be with you," he often said. "Do you know how many girls would love to have someone like me?" Charlotte slowly began believing his words. Her confidence started disappearing. Her closest friends noticed the changes, especially her roommate, Victoria. One evening, Victoria sat beside her and said gently, "Charlotte, are you sure this relationship is good for you?" Charlotte frowned. "Why would you ask that?" "Because you are not the same person anymore," Victoria replied. "You barely smile, you hardly spend time with us. Every time Daniel calls, you look scared." Charlotte immediately defended him. "You don't understand him. He's been through a lot. He loves me." Victoria sighed. Love should not make you afraid. But Charlotte refused to listen. She believed Daniel would change. She believed if she loved him enough, things would get better. Unfortunately, they only got worse. Daniel began insulting her regularly. Nothing she did was ever enough. Whenever she performed well in class, he became angry. "So now you think you're smarter than me?" he asked one day. "No, that's not what I'm saying." "Then why are you always showing off?" he snapped. When she spent long hours studying, he complained, "You care more about books than you care about me." Little by little, Charlotte's life started falling apart. Her grades began dropping. She missed lectures. Even when she attended classes, she struggled to focus. Her mind was constantly occupied by Daniel and his moods. Every day, she worried about saying the wrong thing and making him angry. The bright young woman who had arrived at university full of dreams slowly began disappearing. While Charlotte was fighting to save her education, Daniel was moving in the opposite direction. He eventually dropped out of school completely. Instead of focusing on his future, he spent his time with reckless friends. They partied almost every night, they wasted money and lived carelessly. Yet somehow, Daniel still expected Charlotte to support him. Then came the night that changed everything. Victoria returned to their room earlier than usual and immediately knew something was wrong. Charlotte was sitting on the floor crying uncontrollably. Her clothes were torn, fresh bruises covered her face. Victoria dropped everything she was carrying and rushed towards her. "Charlotte, what happened to you?" Charlotte tried to hide her face, but Victoria gently held her shoulders. "Tell me the truth." Through tears, Charlotte finally spoke. "It was Daniel." Victoria's eyes widened. "What did he do?" Charlotte struggled to speak as tears rolled down her cheeks. "He wanted my school fees." "Your school fees?" Victoria asked in disbelief.
Charlotte nodded. "He said he needed money for a party. When I refused, he became angry." Victoria felt her stomach tighten. "And then?" Charlotte looked down. "He told me to leave school and follow him. He said education was a waste of time. When I refused again," her voice broke completely, "he attacked me." Victoria was horrified. For a moment she could not speak. Then anger filled her face. "We are calling the police right now." Charlotte immediately shook her head. "No, no," Victoria exclaimed. "Look at what he did to you." "Please," Charlotte begged, "don't call them." "Charlotte, this man beat you." "I know. Then why are you protecting him?" Charlotte wiped her tears. "Because I still love him." Victoria stared at her in disbelief. "After this?" Charlotte nodded weakly. "I keep hoping he will change." Victoria's heart broke for her friend. In that moment, she realized Charlotte was trapped in something far more dangerous than she had imagined. Daniel had not only hurt her physically, he had convinced her that she deserved the pain, and that was the most frightening thing of all.
Victoria barely slept that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Charlotte's bruised face and the tears that would not stop falling. She was angry at Daniel, frustrated with Charlotte, and heartbroken for her friend. But one thing she knew for certain was that she was not going to abandon her. The next morning, she sat beside Charlotte and held her hand. "Listen to me carefully," she said softly. "I know you are hurting, but your life is worth more than this pain. You came here for a reason. You had dreams before Daniel came into your life. Do not let him take those dreams away from you." Charlotte looked down at the floor. "I don't know if I can do it anymore." Victoria squeezed her hand. "Yes, you can, and you will not do it alone. I will be here with you every step of the way." From that day forward, Victoria became Charlotte's greatest source of strength. Every morning she encouraged her. Every night she reminded her of the future she once dreamed about. Whenever Charlotte felt weak, Victoria lifted her up. Whenever she doubted herself, Victoria reminded her who she was.
Slowly, Charlotte began to change. She started attending lectures again. At first it was difficult. Sitting in class felt strange after missing so many lessons. Sometimes she struggled to understand topics she had fallen behind on, but she refused to give up. After classes, she spent long hours in the library. While others slept, Charlotte sat with her books late into the night, determined to repair the damage that had been done to her education. Some nights she felt exhausted and discouraged. "I'm so far behind," she told Victoria one evening. "What if I never catch up?" Victoria smiled. "You don't have to catch up with everyone else. Just keep moving forward, one step at a time." Charlotte nodded. One step at a time. As the weeks passed, her confidence slowly began returning. Her grades improved little by little. She started believing in herself again. But while Charlotte was rebuilding her life, Daniel was becoming increasingly angry. He noticed she was no longer answering his calls the way she used to. He noticed she was spending less time with him. He noticed she was finally pulling away. One afternoon, he cornered her after class. "So you think you can ignore me now?" he demanded. Charlotte took a nervous step back. "Daniel, I don't want any problems." "Problems?" he laughed bitterly. "You haven't seen problems yet." Charlotte's heart began pounding. "Please leave me alone." Daniel pointed at her. "You think you are better than me because you are still in school." "I never said that." "You don't need school. You need me." Charlotte shook her head. "No, Daniel. I need my future." His eyes narrowed. "You will regret this." Charlotte remained silent. "Mark my words," Daniel continued. "You will never succeed without me. Nobody will ever love you the way I do." For a moment, fear gripped her. The old Charlotte might have believed him. The old Charlotte might have gone back, but not anymore. Without saying another word, she turned around and walked away. Her legs trembled, but she kept moving. That day was the beginning of her freedom. Daniel continued trying to intimidate her. Sometimes he sent threatening messages. Sometimes he appeared unexpectedly, hoping to frighten her. But each day, Charlotte grew stronger. And through it all, Victoria never left her side. Whenever Charlotte felt afraid, Victoria reminded her how far she had come. She said, "You survived the worst of it. Do not turn back now." Years passed, and eventually graduation day arrived. As Charlotte stood among her fellow students wearing her graduation gown, she could hardly believe she had made it. There were moments when she thought she would lose everything. There were days when she doubted she would ever finish school. Yet there she was, holding the proof that she had survived. When her name was called, tears filled her eyes. In the crowd, Victoria was cheering louder than anyone else. After the ceremony ended, the two friends ran toward each other and embraced tightly. Both of them were crying. "You did it," Victoria said through tears. "You actually did it." Charlotte laughed and cried at the same time. "No, we did it. I would never have made it without you." Victoria smiled. "I only reminded you of the strength you already had." Despite the happiness of that day, one fear still remained in Charlotte's heart: Daniel. She knew he might try to find her again. She knew he might refuse to let go. So shortly after graduation, she quietly left and focused on building a new life for herself. Fortunately, things began to improve. Charlotte secured a good job and threw herself into her work. She worked hard, learned quickly, and earned the respect of those around her. For the first time in many years, life felt peaceful. There were no threats, no insults, no fear. Just quiet days filled with purpose and hope. Then one day, she met James. From the very beginning, there was something different about him. He was kind without trying to impress anyone. He listened when people spoke. He treated everyone with respect. The first time they had a real conversation, Charlotte found herself waiting for the criticism that never came. Instead, James smiled and said, "You seem very passionate about your work." Charlotte blinked in surprise. "You think so?" "Of course," James replied. "It's obvious." She was not used to being encouraged.
She was used to being torn down. As they spent more time together, Charlotte found herself constantly expecting the worst. Whenever James called, she expected demands. Instead, he asked how her day was. Whenever she shared her opinions, she expected arguments. Instead, he listened carefully. Whenever she talked about her dreams, she expected mockery. Instead, he encouraged her. One evening, they sat together after work. "Can I ask you something?" James said. "Sure." "Why do you always look surprised when someone says something nice to you?" Charlotte hesitated. "I don't know." James smiled gently. "Well, you deserve nice things, Charlotte." Those simple words stayed with her for days. Little by little, James helped her see that love was not supposed to hurt. Love was not supposed to control. Love was not supposed to make someone feel worthless. Instead of limiting her dreams, he supported them. Instead of criticizing her achievements, he celebrated them. Instead of controlling her choices, he respected them. Slowly, Charlotte allowed herself to trust again. Slowly, she allowed herself to love again. And before she realized it, she had fallen deeply in love with James. For the first time in her life, she felt completely safe. Yet, despite how close they became, there was one thing Charlotte never told him. She never spoke about Daniel. She never spoke about the abuse, the fear, and the years she spent trying to escape. She convinced herself that chapter of her life was over forever. She hoped she would never have to relive those painful memories again. What she did not know was that fate was quietly preparing a reunion she never expected, a reunion that would bring her past crashing into her present when she least imagined it.
Months later, life had become everything Charlotte once thought was impossible. The fear that had once followed her everywhere was gone. The sadness that used to sit heavily on her heart had slowly been replaced by peace. Most importantly, she had James. Their relationship had grown stronger with each passing day. They laughed together, supported each other, and dreamed about the future. On a beautiful afternoon, the couple decided to have lunch together after work. The date was simple, but to Charlotte it felt special. Every moment spent with James reminded her how different her life had become. As they sat together talking and laughing, she found herself smiling more than she had in years. "You seem happy today," James said with a grin. Charlotte laughed softly. "I am happy." "Good," James replied, "because seeing you smile is one of my favorite things." Charlotte lowered her eyes shyly. Even after all this time, his kindness still touched her deeply. After lunch, they left the hotel hand in hand. Their fingers were intertwined as they walked toward their car. They were talking about plans for the weekend and laughing at something James had said when suddenly a voice cut through the air. "So this is where you ended up." Charlotte stopped walking immediately. Her entire body froze. She recognized that voice before she even turned around. Slowly, she looked up. Standing a few feet away was Daniel. For a moment, the world around her seemed to disappear. Her heart began racing. Her hands grew cold. All the painful memories she had worked so hard to leave behind came rushing back at once. Daniel stared at her with burning anger. The sight of Charlotte looking healthy, confident, and happy filled him with bitterness. He had spent years believing she would fail without him. He had convinced himself that she needed him. Seeing her thriving shattered that illusion. "Look at you," he sneered, "pretending you've become somebody important." Charlotte remained silent. James looked from Charlotte to Daniel, confused by the sudden tension. Daniel laughed mockingly. "You think you're successful now?" he shouted loud enough for nearby people to hear. "You're still the same useless girl you've always been." Several people stopped and turned to look. Charlotte felt her chest tighten. "Daniel, stop," she whispered. But Daniel ignored her. "Tell them the truth," he continued. "Tell them you're nothing. Tell them you're not as perfect as you pretend to be." James's expression hardened. He still had no idea who this man was, but he knew enough to recognize cruelty when he saw it. Daniel pointed at Charlotte. She was never good enough. She never will be. Before Charlotte could explain anything, James stepped forward. His patience had run out. His fist connected with Daniel's face with such force that Daniel crashed to the ground. Gasps erupted from nearby onlookers.
James stood over him. "Never speak about my woman like that again," he said coldly. Daniel groaned as he struggled on the pavement. James then turned toward Charlotte and gently took her trembling hand. "Come on," he said softly. "Let's go." Charlotte allowed him to lead her away. Neither of them said a word as they reached the car. The moment the doors closed, Charlotte finally broke. Tears began pouring down her face. Years of buried pain suddenly erupted. She covered her face with her hands and sobbed uncontrollably. James immediately turned toward her. "Charlotte," his voice softened. "Talk to me. Who is that man?" Charlotte tried to compose herself, but the memories were too overwhelming. Through tears, she finally began telling him everything. She told him about meeting Daniel at university. She told him about the manipulation, the insults, the control, the threats, the beatings, the night she cried herself to sleep, the dreams she nearly lost. She spoke about Victoria and how her friend had refused to give up on her when she had almost given up on herself. She spoke about the fear that followed her even after graduation. As James listened, his face slowly changed. At first there was confusion, then shock, then anger. Deep, burning anger. "He did all that to you?" he asked quietly. Charlotte nodded. Tears continued rolling down her cheeks. "I was afraid for so long." James looked away for a moment, his hands clenched tightly. The thought of someone hurting Charlotte, the woman he loved, filled him with a rage he had never experienced before. Without saying another word, he opened the car door and stepped out. "James," Charlotte called nervously, but he was already walking back toward Daniel. Daniel was still struggling to recover from the first punch. He had barely managed to sit up when James reached him. Before Daniel could react, James struck him again. The blow sent him crashing back to the ground. Then came another, and another, each one fueled by the pain Charlotte had carried for years. Daniel could do nothing but cover himself. "James, stop!" Charlotte screamed as she ran toward them. Fear filled her voice. She grabbed his arm desperately. "Please stop." But James was consumed by fury. It took Charlotte's repeated pleas to finally break through. "Please, James, stop. Please." At that moment, security personnel rushed over and quickly intervened. They separated the two men before things could get worse. Charlotte stood trembling as she held on to James. Her heart was pounding. Slowly, James regained control of himself. He looked down at Daniel, who now lay on the ground, unable to get up. James stepped closer and stared directly into his eyes. His voice was calm, but every word carried weight. "Listen carefully," he said. "Stay away from Charlotte." Daniel remained silent. "Never contact her again." James took another step forward. "If you ever come near her or try to hurt her in any way, you will face consequences you won't forget." Daniel looked at him and immediately understood that this was not an empty threat. James meant every word. For several seconds, neither man spoke. Then James turned around and walked back to Charlotte. He gently took her hand once more. Together, they returned to the car, leaving Daniel behind on the ground, fully aware that the woman he once controlled was no longer alone and no longer afraid. After James and Charlotte left, Daniel remained on the ground for several minutes. His body ached from the blows he had received, and his pride hurt even more. The security guards who had separated the fight looked at him with disappointment. One of them sighed and said, "Young man, whatever happened here, you should learn to leave people alone." Daniel said nothing. He struggled to sit up, his entire body screaming with pain. Eventually, the guards helped him to his feet and assisted him into a taxi. Throughout the journey home, Daniel remained silent. Every movement hurt. Every breath reminded him of what had happened. When he finally arrived home, he could barely walk properly. He slowly heated water and began using it to soothe the pain in his bruised body. As the hot water touched his skin, the physical pain was obvious, but something else hurt far more deeply. For the first time in years, Daniel was alone with his thoughts. There were no friends around, no parties, no distractions, just silence. And in that silence, the truth finally began to speak. He sat quietly and stared into space. One memory after another flooded his mind. He remembered the day he dropped out of university. At the time, he had felt proud of himself. He had believed he was too smart to need an education. He remembered the opportunities he threw away because he preferred temporary pleasures. He remembered the money he wasted. He remembered every reckless decision he made. Then his thoughts turned to Charlotte. He remembered how much she loved him. He remembered how she had believed in him when nobody else did. He remembered the countless times she defended him, even when he did not deserve it. He remembered every cruel insult he had thrown at her, every threat, every act of manipulation, every moment he deliberately tried to make her feel small. Daniel lowered his head into his hands. "What have I done?" he whispered. His voice trembled. The more he thought about it, the clearer everything became. Charlotte had graduated. Despite everything he did to stop her, she graduated. She had built a successful career. She had found peace. She had found happiness. Most painful of all, she had found genuine love. The kind of love he had never given her. The kind of love she had always deserved. Then he looked at his own life. He had no degree, no stable future, no meaningful relationships, no real achievements, nothing. The realization struck him harder than any punch James had thrown. All those years he had called Charlotte useless. All those years he had mocked her and tried to destroy her confidence. Yet now he could finally see the truth. Charlotte was never the useless one. He was. Daniel felt tears gathering in his eyes. For the first time in years, he cried. Not because of the pain in his body, but because of the pain in his heart. He wished he could go back and change everything. He wished he had treated Charlotte differently. He wished he had made better choices. But deep down, he knew the truth. Some mistakes cannot be undone. Some opportunities never return once they are lost. Meanwhile, Charlotte was still struggling emotionally from the unexpected encounter. Although she was relieved that Daniel was gone, seeing him again had reopened wounds she thought had healed completely. James noticed this immediately. In the days that followed, he became even more supportive than before. One evening, they sat together quietly. James took her hand and looked into her eyes. "Charlotte, I need to tell you something." "What is it?" she asked softly. He sighed. "I am sorry for losing my temper that day." Charlotte shook her head. "You were protecting me." "Maybe," James replied, "but I never want you to feel afraid because of my actions. What matters most to me is your peace." Charlotte smiled faintly. James squeezed her hand. "I cannot change what happened to you in the past. I cannot erase the pain Daniel caused, but I promise you this. I will always respect you, I will always support you, and I will always do my best to protect you." Tears filled Charlotte's eyes. Not tears of sadness this time, but tears of gratitude. She looked at the man sitting beside her and realized how fortunate she truly was. For years, she had believed love meant pain. James had taught her that real love meant safety, respect, patience, and kindness. Her love for him grew even deeper. Several months later, James invited Charlotte to a special dinner. Throughout the evening, he seemed unusually nervous. Charlotte noticed but said nothing. Then, at the perfect moment, James stood up, reached into his pocket, and knelt before her. Charlotte's eyes widened. "James!" He smiled warmly. "Charlotte, you are the best thing that has ever happened to me. Every day with you is a gift. Will you marry me?" Tears immediately filled Charlotte's eyes. She nodded before she could even find the words. "Yes," she whispered. Then she laughed through her tears. "Yes, I will marry you." Their wedding took place several months later and was everything they had dreamed of. Family and friends gathered to celebrate their love. The atmosphere was filled with laughter, music, joy, and heartfelt emotions. Everywhere people looked, they saw happiness. Charlotte looked radiant as she walked down the aisle. James could barely take his eyes off her. It was a day neither of them would ever forget. Standing proudly beside Charlotte was Victoria, serving as her chief bridesmaid. As Charlotte looked at her lifelong friend, emotions overwhelmed her once again. During the celebration, Charlotte stood before the guests and spoke from her heart. "There is someone I need to thank," she said. She turned toward Victoria. "Years ago, when my life was falling apart, Victoria refused to give up on me. When I could not see my own worth, she reminded me. When I wanted to surrender, she helped me keep fighting. Without her, I might never have escaped the abuse that nearly destroyed my life." Victoria's eyes immediately filled with tears. The guests applauded warmly as the two women embraced. It was a beautiful moment that reflected the strength of true friendship. Victoria had also found happiness of her own. She was now in a loving relationship with a kind and caring man named Ethan. Watching her smile beside him, many people felt that her loyalty and compassion had been rewarded. As the years moved forward, Charlotte and James built a beautiful life together. Their marriage was founded on trust, respect, friendship, and love. Their future looked bright, and their story became proof that healing was possible even after tremendous pain. From time to time, Daniel would hear news about Charlotte. Sometimes he saw photographs of her smiling. Sometimes he heard about her achievements. Sometimes he learnt about another milestone she had reached. Each time, he quietly watched from a distance. He never approached her, partly because he remembered James's warning, but mostly because he finally understood something important. Charlotte had moved on. She had built a life that no longer included him. He no longer belonged in her world. And so he remained a distant observer, watching the woman he once tried to break become stronger than he had ever imagined. As for Charlotte, she never looked back. The chapter called Daniel was finally over. The story of Charlotte teaches us that love should never require suffering, fear, or abuse. A person who truly loves you will encourage your growth, not destroy it. Emotional manipulation often starts small, but can become dangerous if ignored. Good friends can save lives by speaking the truth when we cannot see it ourselves. Leaving a toxic relationship may be difficult, but staying can cost you your future. Education and self-improvement create opportunities that no one can take away from you. The choices we make today determine the life we live tomorrow. Respect is one of the strongest foundations of a healthy relationship. People who spend their lives pulling others down often end up destroying themselves. Most importantly, your past does not define your future. With courage, determination, and the support of good people, it is possible to rebuild your life, heal from old wounds, and find the happiness you deserve.